The mining colony of Kepler 442b had always been a quiet place. Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the reinforced viewport of Research Station Gamma, watching the twin suns cast long shadows across the crystalline formations that made this planet so valuable. The silence here felt different from Earth's silence. There, quiet meant peace. Here, it felt like the universe holding its breath. "Another successful day of absolutely nothing happening," muttered her research partner, Dr. James Rodriguez, as he updated their daily logs. The xenobiology lab hummed with the soft sounds of environmental systems and data processors. 3 months into their survey mission, they had cataloged 17 species of crystalline moss, documented the mineral composition of 43 different rock formations, and discovered exactly 0 signs of intelligent life. Sarah turned from the window, her dark hair catching the light from the overhead panels. "You say that like it's a bad thing. Some of us actually enjoy peaceful research without having to worry about hostile contact protocols." James laughed, a sound that echoed slightly in the sterile lab. "Speak for yourself. I didn't sign up for this mission to count rocks and moss samples." The recruitment brief mentioned potential for first contact scenarios. The recruitment brief had mentioned a lot of things. It had talked about the possibility of discovering new life forms, the potential for groundbreaking scientific discoveries, and the chance to be part of humanity's expanding presence in the galaxy. What it hadn't mentioned was the crushing loneliness of being one of only 12 humans on a planet that seemed utterly devoid of interesting life. Their research station was part of a larger mining operation run by Stellar Dynamics Corporation. The main facility housed about 200 workers, mostly automated systems with human oversight. The corporation had established 3 research outposts to study the planet's ecosystem before full-scale mining operations began. Station Gamma, where Sarah and James worked, focused on biological surveys. The planet itself was beautiful in an alien way. The crystalline formations that covered much of the surface created natural prisms that split the light from the twin suns into spectacular rainbow displays. The air was breathable for humans with only minor filtration, and the gravity was comfortable at about 80% of Earth normal. It should have been paradise for researchers. Instead, it felt empty. Sarah was about to return to her microscope when the communication panel chimed. The voice of Captain Martinez, head of station security, filled the lab with its usual professional tone. "All research teams, please report to the main conference room. We've received some interesting data from the orbital sensors that you'll want to see." Sarah and James exchanged glances. Captain Martinez wasn't known for calling meetings unless something significant had happened. They secured their current experiments and made their way through the station's corridors toward the central hub. The conference room was already filling with personnel when they arrived. Sarah recognized most of the faces, the other research teams, senior mining supervisors, and key technical staff. Captain Martinez stood at the front of the room next to a large display screen showing what appeared to be sensor data. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on short notice," Martinez began. "At approximately 1400 hours today, our orbital detection grid picked up something unusual. Dr. Yamato, would you please explain what we're looking at?" Dr. Kenji Yamato, the station's chief scientist, stepped forward. He was a small man with graying hair and the intense focus of someone who had spent decades studying things others couldn't see. "What you're seeing here is a gravitational anomaly detected by our deep space sensors. The signature suggests a large object dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of our solar system." A murmur ran through the assembled personnel. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. After months of routine research, the possibility of something actually happening was both exciting and terrifying. "How large are we talking?" asked Dr. Peterson from the geology team. "Based on the gravitational displacement, we estimate the object is approximately 2 kilometers in length. That's significantly larger than any known human vessel." Dr. Yamato touched the display, and the image shifted to show a trajectory analysis. "More concerning is the fact that it's moving toward our system at sublight speeds. Current projections suggest it will reach Kepler 442b in approximately 72 hours. The room fell silent. Sarah looked around at the faces of her colleagues and saw her own mixture of excitement and concern reflected back at her. First contact had always been a theoretical possibility, something they trained for but never really expected to encounter. Captain Martinez stepped forward again. "We've already sent a coded transmission to Earth Command, but, given communication delays, we won't receive instructions for at least 6 weeks. We're on our own for this one. What are our options? Asked James, voicing the question everyone was thinking. Standard first contact protocols recommend maintaining radio silence and defensive positions until we can determine intent, Martinez replied. However, our defensive capabilities are limited. This is a research and mining facility, not a military installation. We have basic shields and point defense systems, but nothing designed to handle a vessel of this size. Dr. Yumoto manipulated the display again, showing a detailed breakdown of the station's defensive systems. Our shields can handle micrometeorites and small debris, but they're not designed for combat scenarios. The point defense grid is primarily for asteroid deflection. Sarah raised her hand. Has the object made any attempt to communicate? Negative. We've been monitoring all standard communication frequencies since detection. Whatever it is, it's maintaining complete radio silence. The implications were unsettling. In all of humanity's scenarios for first contact, communication had been assumed to be the first step. An alien vessel that approached without any attempt at dialogue suggested either technological incompatibility or hostile intent. What about the other research stations? Asked Dr. Chun from Station Alpha. Are we coordinating our response? Martinez nodded. All 3 research stations are implementing identical protocols. Station Alpha and Beta are continuing their regular operations while maintaining heightened alert status. We're treating this as a system-wide situation. The meeting continued for another hour, covering evacuation procedures, communication protocols, and defensive strategies. By the time it ended, Sarah felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. The quiet routine of the past 3 months suddenly seemed precious. As the personnel filed out of the conference room, Sarah caught up with Dr. Yumoto. Kenji, what's your gut feeling about this? You've been studying space phenomena longer than anyone here. The older scientist paused, considering his words carefully. In my experience, Dr. Chen, the universe rarely presents us with coincidences. An unidentified vessel appearing in a system where humans have recently established a presence, it suggests we may not be as alone as we thought. That's what I'm afraid of, Sarah admitted. That evening, Sarah found herself back at the viewport in the lab, staring out at the alien landscape. The twin suns were setting, casting the crystalline formations in deep purples and oranges. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of her vision, something was approaching their small outpost of humanity. James joined her at the window, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Couldn't sleep either? Too much to think about, Sarah replied, accepting the warm cup gratefully. 3 months ago, our biggest concern was whether we'd discover a new type of crystalline algae. Now we're potentially facing first contact with an unknown alien species. Maybe it's not aliens, James suggested. Could be an automated probe, or even a human vessel we don't have records of. Sarah considered this possibility. A 2-kilometer human vessel that Earth Command doesn't know about? That seems unlikely. Unlikely, but not impossible. Maybe it's a deep space exploration ship that's been out of contact for years. Maybe it's a colony ship that got lost and is just now finding its way home. The optimistic scenarios were appealing, but Sarah's scientific training made her consider the alternatives. If it was an alien vessel, what were the chances that the first extraterrestrial intelligence humanity encountered would be peaceful? The galaxy was vast and old. Any species capable of interstellar travel had likely been exploring space for far longer than humans had even been using fire. James, if this is first contact, do you think we're ready for it? Her research partner was quiet for a long moment, sipping his coffee and watching the alien sunset. I don't think anyone can ever be truly ready for something like this. But we're scientists, Sarah. Our job is to observe, analyze, and understand. Whatever's coming our way, we'll face it the way humans always have, by learning as much as we can and adapting to the situation. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation and nervous anticipation. The research teams continued their work, but everyone was distracted by the approaching vessel. Regular updates from the orbital sensors showed the object maintaining its steady course toward Kepler 442b. It hadn't deviated from its trajectory or shown any response to the passive scanning attempts. On the second day, Dr. Yumoto made an announcement that changed everything. We've managed to get some visual data on the approaching vessel, he said during the daily briefing. The main display lit up with a grainy but unmistakable image of something that definitely wasn't human in origin. The vessel was organic-looking, with flowing curves and what appeared to be living tissue covering its hull. Multiple appendages extended from its main body like the legs of some cosmic arthropod. The overall impression was of something that had grown rather than been built. "This is definitely not human technology," Dr. Yamamoto continued. "The biomechanical design suggests a species that integrates living components into their technology. We're looking at genuine alien contact." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. After decades of searching for signs of extraterrestrial life, it was coming to them. Captain Martinez stepped forward. "Based on current trajectory and speed, the vessel will enter our local space in approximately 18 hours. All personnel are to remain on high alert. Research operations are suspended effective immediately." As the meeting dispersed, Sarah felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. She was about to become part of humanity's first contact with an alien species. The question that haunted her was whether she would live to tell anyone about it. That night, she stood once again at the laboratory viewport, but this time she wasn't alone. Most of the station's personnel had gathered at various windows and observation decks, all watching the stars for some sign of their approaching visitors. The alien vessel was still too far away to see with the naked eye, but its presence dominated everyone's thoughts. Somewhere out there in the darkness, beings from another world were approaching their small outpost. Whether they came in peace or with hostile intentions would determine not just the fate of the research station, but potentially the future relationship between humanity and whatever galactic community might exist among the stars. Sarah pressed her hand against the cool surface of the viewport and whispered a prayer to whatever gods might be listening. Tomorrow would bring answers to questions humanity had been asking for centuries. She only hoped they would live long enough to appreciate those answers. The alert klaxon shattered the morning calm of Research Station Gamma at exactly 0347 hours. Sarah jolted awake in her quarters, her training immediately kicking in as she reached for her emergency comm unit. "All personnel to emergency stations," Captain Martinez's voice crackled through the speaker system. "We have incoming contacts. Multiple vessels detected on approach vector." Sarah threw on her uniform and raced through the corridors toward the main command center. The station buzzed with activity as personnel rushed to their assigned positions. Emergency lighting bathed everything in an ominous red glow, and the constant hum of the base's defensive systems powering up created an underlying tension that made her skin crawl. The command center was chaos when she arrived. Banks of monitors displayed sensor data, trajectory calculations, and system status reports. Captain Martinez stood at the central command console, his face grim as he coordinated with the other stations. "Report!" Sarah heard him bark into his headset. Dr. Yamamoto looked up from his sensor station, his face pale. "Captain, we've got a problem. The original vessel we detected has split into 17 smaller ships. Each one is approximately 200 meters in length, and they're spreading out in what appears to be a coordinated attack formation." Sarah's blood ran cold. An attack formation meant these weren't explorers or peaceful visitors. Whatever was approaching their station had come with violent intentions. "Time to contact?" Martinez asked, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "Approximately 4 hours at current speed," Yamamoto replied. "But, Captain, there's more. We're detecting additional energy signatures from the smaller vessels. They appear to be powering up weapons systems." The command center fell silent except for the electronic beeping and humming of the monitoring equipment. Sarah looked around at the faces of her colleagues and saw her own fear reflected back at her. They were scientists and miners, not soldiers. None of them had signed up to face an alien invasion. "What about the other research stations?" asked Dr. Peterson, who had arrived breathless from Station Alpha's communication relay. Martinez adjusted his headset. "Station Alpha and Station Beta are reporting identical situations. The alien force has split into 3 groups, with one targeting each of our installations." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't a random encounter or a case of mistaken identity. The aliens had specifically targeted all 3 human installations on Kepler 442b. They had come hunting. "Sir," called out Technician Williams from the communications console. "I'm detecting movement from the mining facility. The main complex is launching their defensive drones." The main display shifted to show the larger mining facility approximately 50 kilometers from their position. Small points of light were rising from the complex, forming defensive perimeters around the installation. Sarah knew those drones were equipped with basic weapons, but they were designed for asteroid defense, not space combat.
Any word from Earth Command? Martinez asked, though Sarah could tell from his tone that he already knew the answer. Negative, sir. Even emergency quantum entanglement communication would take weeks to reach Earth and get a response back.
They were truly on their own. Dr. Yumoto suddenly straightened at his console.
Captain, I'm detecting new energy readings from the alien vessels. There, oh my god. What is it, Doctor? They're not just weapons systems, sir. I'm reading biological signatures.
These ships aren't just carrying aliens, they appear to be partially alive themselves.
Sarah moved closer to look at the sensor data. The readings were unlike anything in the human databases.
The alien vessels showed clear signs of organic components integrated with technological systems. It was as if someone had crossed a starfish with a spacecraft and given it the ability to hunt.
Are they trying to communicate? Sarah asked, hoping against hope that this might still be some kind of misunderstanding.
Negative, replied the communications officer.
We've tried all standard first contact protocols. No response on any frequency.
Captain Martinez turned to address the room.
Ladies and gentlemen, it appears we're facing a hostile alien force. I want all non-essential personnel evacuated to the emergency shelters immediately. Research staff, your expertise may be crucial in understanding what we're dealing with. I'm asking for volunteers to remain in the command center. Without hesitation, Sarah stepped forward. I'm staying. James nodded beside her. Me too.
Dr. Yumoto never even looked up from his sensors.
Wild horses couldn't drag me away from this data.
Within 30 minutes, the command center had been reduced to essential personnel only. The rest of the station's crew had been evacuated to the underground emergency shelters, reinforced bunkers designed to protect against natural disasters but hopefully adequate against whatever was coming their way. Sarah found herself assigned to the biological analysis station, trying to make sense of the sensor readings from the approaching vessels.
What she saw defied everything she knew about spacecraft design and alien biology.
James, look at this, she called to her research partner, who was working on communication protocols. The alien ships are showing clear signs of metabolic activity.
They're not just biomechanical, parts of them are actually alive.
James moved to her console and studied the data.
That's impossible. How could a living organism survive in space?
I don't know, but the readings don't lie. Look at these energy signatures.
They match what we'd expect from biological systems processing nutrients and generating waste products.
These ships are like space-going creatures. Dr. Yumoto overheard their conversation and joined them. That would explain some of the unusual readings we've been getting. If the ships are partially organic, they might be able to heal damage, adapt to different environments, even reproduce.
The implications were staggering.
Humanity had always assumed that any spacefaring species would use technology similar to their own: metal hulls, conventional propulsion, electronic systems. The idea of biological spacecraft suggested a completely different evolutionary path.
Contact in 2 hours, announced the tracking officer.
Sarah tried to focus on her analysis, but her mind kept wandering to the bigger picture. These aliens had found humanity's presence on Kepler 442b and had immediately responded with what appeared to be a coordinated military strike. That suggested either that they viewed humans as a threat, or that they were naturally aggressive toward any other species they encountered.
Neither possibility was reassuring.
Captain, Dr. Yumoto called out suddenly.
I'm detecting something new from the alien formation. They're launching smaller objects. Hundreds of them.
The main display shifted to show the sensor data. From each of the larger alien vessels, clouds of smaller objects were being released. They moved with the same organic flow as the larger ships, but their trajectory was different.
They're heading for the planet's surface, Martinez observed. ETA approximately 90 minutes.
Sarah felt her stomach drop.
They're not just attacking the stations.
They're planning a surface invasion.
The realization hit everyone in the command center simultaneously.
This wasn't just about destroying the human installations, the aliens intended to occupy the planet. Sir, called the communications officer, I'm receiving an emergency transmission from the mining facility.
They're reporting alien contacts approaching their position.
The transmission crackled through the speakers, filled with static and the sounds of alarms in the background.
This is Mining Complex Alpha.
We have visual confirmation of alien vessels.
Oh God, they're landing. Deploying ground forces. Request immediate assistance.
The transmission cut to static. Sarah stared at the communications console in horror. The mining facility housed nearly 200 people, miners, technicians, support staff, and their families.
If the aliens were deploying ground forces there, those people were in immediate danger.
Can we help them? She asked Captain Martinez. The security chief's face was grim. Our defensive capabilities are limited to protecting this station.
We don't have the resources to mount a rescue operation.
What about the other research stations? Station Alpha and Beta are facing identical situations.
We're all on our own.
Dr. Yamato looked up from his sensors with a puzzled expression.
Captain, I'm detecting additional movement from the alien landing forces. They appear to be hurting something.
Hurting what?
I'm not sure. The biological sensors are picking up multiple life signs moving in coordinated groups across the planet's surface. It's not human, but it's definitely organic. Sarah felt a chill of understanding. The indigenous life forms.
The aliens aren't just invading, they're rounding up the local wildlife. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, and Sarah didn't like the picture they formed. The aliens hadn't come to Kepler 442b to establish peaceful contact or even to simply eliminate the human presence.
They were conducting some kind of biological harvest operation. 30 minutes to contact, announced the tracking officer.
Captain Martinez activated the station-wide communication system.
All personnel, this is the captain. Hostile alien forces will reach our position in 30 minutes. Emergency protocols are now in effect. All civilians are to remain in the emergency shelters until further notice.
Sarah looked around the command center at the faces of her colleagues. These were good people, scientists, researchers, support staff who had come to Kepler 442b to expand human knowledge and push the boundaries of exploration. None of them deserved to die in an alien hunting expedition. James, she said quietly, if we don't make it through this, I want you to know that working with you has been the best part of this assignment. Her research partner managed a weak smile.
We're going to make it through this, Sarah. Humans are survivors. We've faced extinction before and come back stronger.
Dr. Yamato suddenly straightened at his console.
Captain.
The alien vessels are slowing down. They're entering orbital positions above the station. The main display showed the tactical situation. 17 alien ships had arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around Research Station Gamma, effectively surrounding them from all directions. There was no escape route.
Are they trying to communicate now? Martinez asked.
Negative. Still maintaining radio silence. Sarah studied the positioning of the alien vessels and felt her scientific mind working despite her fear.
They're not random positions.
Look at the spacing, it's mathematically precise.
These aliens understand advanced tactical positioning. Which means they're not mindless predators, James added. They're intelligent, organized, and they've done this before. The realization was both encouraging and terrifying.
Intelligent aliens might be reasoned with, but organized aliens who had clearly conducted similar operations before suggested that humanity was dealing with an experienced military force. Energy readings are spiking across all alien vessels, Dr. Yamato reported.
I think they're preparing to attack.
Captain Martinez moved to the weapons control station.
All defensive systems online. Point defense grid active. Shields at maximum.
Sarah watched the tactical display as the alien vessels maneuvered into their final attack positions. Whatever was about to happen would determine not just the fate of Research Station Gamma, but potentially the future of human expansion into the galaxy.
Contact in 5 minutes, the tracking officer announced. Sarah took a deep breath and prepared to witness humanity's first alien battle.
She only hoped someone would survive to remember what happened here. The first alien weapon struck Research Station Gamma's shields with a sound like breaking glass mixed with screaming metal. Sarah watched the defensive readings spike and immediately drop by 30% as the energy barrier absorbed the impact. The aliens weren't using conventional energy weapons, their attacks seemed to pulse and writhe like living things.
Shields holding at 70%, reported the defensive systems officer. But, Captain, these aren't normal weapons. The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases.
Captain Martinez gripped the command console as the station shuddered under another impact.
Keep those shields up.
Return fire with the point defense grid. The station's defensive weapons came online, targeting the nearest alien vessel with precisely calculated bursts of energy.
Sarah watched the tactical display as their shots connected with the organic-looking ship.
Instead of exploding or showing conventional damage, the alien vessel seemed to absorb the impacts and actually began to glow brighter.
Direct hits confirmed, called the weapons officer.
But, Captain, they're not taking damage. If anything, our weapons seem to be feeding their energy systems.
Dr. Yumoto looked up from his sensor array with alarm.
The alien vessels are converting our weapon energy into some kind of biological fuel.
Our attacks are making them stronger.
Sarah felt her heart sink. Humanity's standard defensive tactics were not just ineffective against these aliens, they were actually helping the enemy. Whatever these beings were, they had evolved or developed technology that could turn attacks into advantages.
Cease fire. Martinez ordered. All weapons offline immediately.
The station fell silent except for the hum of the shield generators and the occasional impact of alien weapons against their defenses.
Sarah studied the sensor readings, trying to understand how the aliens' biomechanical technology worked.
James, look at this, she called to her research partner. The alien ships show massive increases in metabolic activity immediately after being hit by our weapons. It's like they're digesting the energy and using it to grow stronger. That's evolutionarily brilliant, James replied, moving to study her data. A predator species that becomes more powerful when attacked would have enormous survival advantages.
Captain Martinez overheard their conversation. Dr. Chen, are you saying these aliens are natural predators? Sarah nodded grimly.
The evidence suggests they've evolved to hunt other species. Their technology is designed to turn defensive actions into feeding opportunities.
We're not dealing with a military force, we're facing biological predators that have achieved spaceflight. The implications were staggering.
Humanity had always assumed that any spacefaring species would be highly advanced and, presumably civilized. The idea of space-going predators had never seriously been considered.
Shields down to 40%, the defensive officer reported.
At this rate of decay, we have maybe 20 minutes before complete failure. Dr. Yumoto suddenly looked up from his console with excitement.
Captain, I'm detecting something interesting.
The alien weapons aren't just draining our shields, they're also scanning our defensive grid. They're learning how our technology works. Sarah felt a chill run through her.
They're not just feeding on our energy. They're studying us.
Learning our capabilities and weaknesses.
Like predators testing their prey, James added quietly.
Captain Martinez moved to the communication station.
Get me a direct line to the emergency shelters.
I need to speak with Dr. Harrison about our evacuation options. Dr. Harrison was the station's emergency coordinator, responsible for civilian safety protocols. His voice crackled through the speakers, tense but professional. Captain, the shelters are secure, but we've got a problem. The alien forces on the surface are moving toward our position.
Ground-penetrating sensors show they'll reach the shelter entrance in approximately 15 minutes.
Sarah's blood ran cold. The aliens weren't just attacking from space, they were conducting a coordinated assault from multiple vectors. The people in the emergency shelters were trapped between the surface forces and the orbital bombardment.
How many people are in the shelters? Martinez asked. 63 civilians plus security teams.
We have basic defensive weapons, but nothing designed to handle an alien ground assault.
Sarah looked at the tactical display showing both the orbital situation and the approaching ground forces.
The aliens had planned this attack with precision, cutting off all escape routes and overwhelming their defenses through superior coordination.
Captain, Dr. Yumoto called out urgently. I'm detecting new movement from the alien vessels. They're launching additional objects toward the planet's surface. The sensor data showed dozens of new projectiles streaming down from the orbiting alien ships.
Unlike the previous landing forces, these objects were much larger and appeared to be heading directly for Research Station Gamma.
Time to impact? Martinez asked. Approximately 8 minutes.
Sarah studied the incoming objects and felt her scientific curiosity overcome her fear.
Captain, request permission to analyze the incoming projectiles. If we can understand their technology, we might be able to find a weakness. Granted.
But make it fast, Doctor. Sarah threw herself into the sensor analysis, pulling up every piece of data the station's instruments could gather about the approaching alien objects. What she found was both fascinating and terrifying. "These aren't missiles," she announced to the command center.
"They're living creatures. Biological entities with integrated technology components.
The aliens are essentially dropping living weapons on our position." James joined her analysis, his xenobiology expertise proving invaluable.
"Look at the internal structure, Sarah.
These creatures have natural armor plating, multiple redundant biological systems, and what appears to be an integrated nervous system connected to technological components. It's like they've weaponized evolution itself," Sarah murmured in amazement and horror.
Dr. Yumoto looked up from tracking the orbital vessels. "Captain, the alien ships are moving into new positions.
They're creating a tighter formation around the station.
Shields down to 20%, the defensive officer reported. We're losing defensive integrity across all sections."
Captain Martinez made a decision that would haunt Sarah for the rest of her life. "All hands, prepare for ground assault. Defensive teams to positions Alpha through Delta.
Civilian evacuation to emergency bunkers is no longer viable." The realization hit everyone in the command center simultaneously. The emergency shelters weren't safe anymore.
With alien ground forces approaching from one direction and biological weapons incoming from orbit, nowhere on Research Station Gamma offered true protection. "Sir," called the communications officer, "I'm receiving emergency transmissions from both Station Alpha and Station Beta. They're reporting similar situations, orbital bombardment combined with ground assault." Sarah felt the weight of understanding settle on her shoulders. This wasn't just an attack on her research station. The aliens were conducting a coordinated assault on all human presence on Kepler 442b. They were systematically eliminating every trace of human colonization.
"Time to impact, 2 minutes," announced the tracking officer.
Sarah looked around the command center at her colleagues, good people who had come to this distant world in the name of science and exploration. Captain Martinez, dedicated to protecting civilian lives.
Dr. Yumoto, whose curiosity about the universe had driven him across the galaxy.
James, her research partner and closest friend on this alien world. They were about to face an enemy unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Biological predators that had evolved to hunt across the stars, turning the very act of resistance into fuel for their continued assault. "Incoming," the defensive officer shouted.
The first of the biological weapons struck the station's hull with tremendous force.
Sarah felt the entire structure shudder as something large and alive tore through the outer defensive layers. Emergency alarms blared throughout the facility as atmospheric warnings indicated multiple hull breaches. "Sections 7 through 12 are compromised," reported the damage control officer.
"We're reading massive biological activity in the affected areas."
Sarah pulled up the internal sensor data and gasped. The creatures that had impacted the station weren't just attacking the structure, they were actually beginning to grow and spread throughout the compromised sections. Like some kind of alien cancer, they were consuming the station's materials and converting them into more of themselves. "They're not just weapons," she announced in horror.
"They're biological conversion systems.
They're literally eating the station and turning it into more alien biomass."
"How long before they reach the command center?" Martinez asked, his voice steady despite the chaos around them.
Sarah ran the calculations based on the observed growth rate.
"At current expansion velocity, approximately 12 minutes.
James moved to the emergency weapon locker and began distributing personal defense weapons to the command center staff.
"We need to evacuate now, while we still can." But Captain Martinez shook his head. "Evacuate to where?"
"The surface forces have cut off ground escape routes, and the orbital bombardment makes aerial evacuation impossible." Dr. Yumoto suddenly looked up from his sensors with an expression of desperate hope.
"Captain, I'm detecting something unusual about the alien expansion pattern. They're avoiding certain sections of the station. Areas with high electromagnetic field generation." Sarah immediately understood the implications. The fusion reactor containment area. The electromagnetic fields from the reactor might be interfering with their biological systems. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was better than staying in the command center waiting to be consumed by alien biomass. Captain Martinez quickly coordinated the evacuation of essential personnel toward the reactor section while maintaining skeleton crews at critical defensive positions. As they made their way through the station's corridors, Sarah could hear the sounds of the alien infestation spreading through the compromised sections. Wet, organic sounds mixed with the grinding of metal being consumed and converted. The station was being digested alive. Emergency shelter teams reporting heavy contact with surface forces crackled through Martinez's portable communicator. We're falling back to secondary positions, but they're overrunning our defensive perimeters. Sarah realized that the people in the emergency shelters were fighting for their lives while the command team fled toward the reactor section. The guilt was overwhelming, but there was nothing they could do to help without abandoning their only chance of survival. The reactor section was located in the most heavily shielded part of the station, surrounded by multiple layers of electromagnetic containment fields. As they entered the area, Sarah immediately noticed that the alien growth sounds from other parts of the station were muted here. The electromagnetic interference is definitely affecting their expansion rate, Dr. Yamato confirmed, checking his portable sensors. But their temporary safety came with a price. They were now trapped in a section of the station with limited communications, minimal defensive capabilities, and no clear evacuation route. They had bought time, but time for what? Sarah looked around at the faces of her surviving colleagues and realized that they might be the only humans left alive on Kepler 442b. Research Station Gamma was dying around them, consumed by alien predators that treated technology and biology as equally digestible resources. Somewhere in the chaos of destruction and desperation, humanity was about to discover what it truly meant to fight for survival against an enemy that viewed them as nothing more than another species to hunt. The reactor section's electromagnetic fields provided only temporary refuge. Sarah watched the portable sensors as Dr. Yamato tracked the alien biomass spreading through Research Station Gamma. The creatures were learning, adapting to the electromagnetic interference with each passing hour. They're developing resistance to the field effects, Yamato reported grimly. The expansion has slowed but not stopped. At current adaptation rates, they'll breach the reactor section in approximately 6 hours. Captain Martinez studied the station schematics on a portable display. 6 hours to find a solution or make our final stand. The group had been reduced to 8 people: Captain Martinez, Dr. Yamato, Sarah, James, 2 security officers, and 2 technicians from the reactor maintenance crew. Everyone else was either trapped in the overrun sections of the station or fighting the losing battle with surface forces near the emergency shelters. Sarah had been analyzing the sensor data for the past hour, trying to understand how the alien bioweapons operated. What she discovered challenged everything she thought she knew about biological systems. "James, look at this metabolic analysis," she called to her research partner. "These creatures aren't following normal biological rules. They're processing matter and energy at rates that should be physically impossible." James studied the data, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The energy conversion efficiency is nearly 100%. That's thermodynamically impossible for any known biological system." Dr. Yamato joined their analysis. "Unless they're not purely biological. The integration of technology and organic systems might allow them to bypass normal thermodynamic limitations." Sarah felt a spark of understanding. What if that's the key? They're hybrid systems, dependent on both biological and technological components. If we could disrupt the interface between the two, we might be able to cause a cascade failure, James finished her thought. But how do we target the biotech interface without affecting our own systems? One of the reactor technicians, Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, had been listening to their conversation while monitoring the fusion containment systems. "Doctors, I might have an idea. The fusion reactor produces specific harmonic frequencies as a byproduct of the containment field modulation. We could adjust those frequencies to create interference patterns." Sarah looked at the reactor specifications with growing excitement. Harmonic interference could disrupt the neural pathways connecting the biological and technological components. It's like using sound to scramble their communication systems. Captain Martinez moved closer to their group. How long would it take to implement this solution? Chief Rodriguez checked his system's display. About 2 hours to reconfigure the harmonic output generators. But, there's a risk, if we destabilize the containment field frequency, we could cause a reactor overload. What are the odds of a successful modification without triggering a catastrophic failure? Martinez asked.
Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, running calculations on his portable computer.
Approximately 60% chance of success. 40% chance of reactor breach. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications.
They could attempt to use the reactor to generate frequencies that might stop the alien infestation, but failure would result in a fusion explosion that would destroy not only Research Station Gamma but create a radioactive crater visible from orbit.
What about the people in the emergency shelters? Sarah asked. If we succeed in stopping the alien biomass, do they have a chance? Dr. Yamato checked his communications equipment. I've been monitoring emergency frequencies.
The shelter teams are still fighting, but they're being overwhelmed. Even if we stop the station infestation, the surface forces are conducting a systematic elimination of human presence.
James moved to a viewport that showed the planet's surface.
In the distance, they could see the glow of fires from the mining complex and energy discharges from ongoing battles.
The aliens aren't just attacking us. They're harvesting the planet's indigenous life forms. We're witnessing an ecological conquest.
Sarah watched the distant battles and felt something shift inside her. These aliens had come to Kepler 442b not as explorers or even conquerors, but as harvesters. They treated entire ecosystems as resources to be consumed and converted.
Humanity was just another species to be processed.
Captain, she said quietly, I volunteered to assist Chief Rodriguez with the reactor modifications. If we're going to attempt this, we need someone with biochemical expertise to help target the harmonic frequencies.
Martinez nodded slowly.
Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Chen, you have authorization to attempt the reactor modification. Everyone else, prepare for either evacuation or final defensive positions. Over the next 2 hours, Sarah worked alongside Chief Rodriguez to modify the fusion reactor's harmonic output systems. The work was delicate and dangerous. One miscalculation could destabilize the containment field and trigger an explosion that would obliterate them instantly. The biotech interface appears to operate on specific neural frequency ranges, Sarah explained as she fine-tuned the harmonic modulation systems. If we can generate interference patterns in those ranges, we might be able to disrupt their command and control systems.
Rodriguez made final adjustments to the harmonic generators. The frequency pattern is configured.
But, Dr. Chen, I need you to understand something. Once we activate this system, there's no way to shut it down safely.
The reactor will either succeed in generating the interference pattern or it will overload completely.
Sarah looked around at her colleagues who were preparing for what might be their final battle. Captain Martinez was coordinating with the remaining security teams.
Dr. Yamato was monitoring the alien biomass as it continued its inexorable approach toward the reactor section.
James was analyzing the tactical situation and trying to find alternative solutions. These people had become her family during their months on Kepler 442b. They had shared the isolation of deep space research, the excitement of scientific discovery, and now the terror of facing an enemy beyond their worst nightmares.
Chief Rodriguez, she said firmly, initiate the harmonic sequence.
The reactor's harmonic generators came online with a deep, thrumming sound that seemed to vibrate through the station's superstructure.
Sarah watched the sensor readings as the carefully modulated frequencies propagated through Research Station Gamma. For several minutes, nothing seemed to happen.
The alien biomass continued its steady advance, now less than 2 hours from breaching the reactor section.
Sarah began to fear that their desperate gamble had failed. Then, Dr. Yamato looked up from his sensors with amazement. The expansion has stopped.
The alien biomass is showing signs of neural disruption.
The biotech integration is failing.
Sarah felt a surge of hope as she watched the sensor readings.
Throughout the station, the alien infestation was beginning to convulse and break down. The harmonic frequencies were indeed disrupting the interface between biological and technological components.
It's working, James called out excitedly. The alien systems are experiencing cascade failures across all infected sections. But their celebration was short-lived.
Captain Martinez received an urgent communication from the emergency shelter teams. Captain, this is Emergency Team Alpha.
The surface forces are regrouping for a final assault.
We count approximately 200 alien ground units moving toward our position.
They'll overrun the shelters within 30 minutes. Sarah realized that while they had solved the problem of the station infestation, the larger battle was far from over. The alien ground forces were still conducting their harvest operation, and the orbital vessels continued to maintain their siege positions around the planet.
Can we extend the harmonic field to affect the surface forces? She asked Chief Rodriguez. The reactor technician shook his head. The field strength decreases exponentially with distance.
It might affect aliens within the station, but it won't reach the surface forces.
Dr. Yamato suddenly looked up from his sensors with an expression of shock. Captain, the orbital vessels are responding to our harmonic attack. They're moving into a new formation.
Sarah felt her heart sink as she watched the tactical display. The alien ships were reconfiguring themselves into a tighter formation directly above Research Station Gamma.
Instead of retreating from the harmonic interference, they appeared to be preparing for something much worse. Energy readings are spiking across all alien vessels, Yamato reported.
They're charging weapons systems to maximum power.
Captain Martinez understood the implications immediately. They're going to destroy the station from orbit rather than risk losing their biotech advantage.
Sarah realized that their successful defense of the reactor section had actually signed their death warrant. By proving that human technology could disrupt alien biotech integration, they had demonstrated that humanity posed a threat to the aliens' technological superiority.
The response would be complete annihilation. Time to orbital bombardment? Martinez asked grimly. Approximately 10 minutes, Yamato replied.
Sarah looked around at her colleagues and made a decision that would define the rest of her life. If we're going to die here, let's make sure our deaths mean something. We need to transmit everything we've learned about these aliens to Earth Command.
James immediately moved to the communications console. I'll encode everything we've learned about their biotech vulnerabilities. If any human ship ever encounters these aliens again, they'll know how to fight them.
Dr. Yamato began compiling all sensor data from the encounter. Biological analysis, technological specifications, tactical patterns, everything that might help Earth Command prepare defenses.
Sarah worked frantically to complete her analysis of the alien biotech integration systems.
The harmonic frequencies they had discovered could potentially be weaponized into a defense against future alien incursions.
But only if someone survived to implement the solution. Transmission ready, James announced. Emergency quantum burst aimed at Earth Command. The data packet includes everything we've learned. Send it, Martinez ordered without hesitation.
As the transmission streaked away from Kepler 442b at faster than light speeds, Sarah felt a small sense of accomplishment. Their deaths might still serve a purpose.
Humanity would be warned about the alien threat and armed with knowledge about how to fight it.
Orbital bombardment commencing in 60 seconds, Dr. Yamato reported, his voice steady despite their impending doom.
Sarah moved to the viewport to watch their final moments.
The alien ships above were glowing with accumulated energy, preparing to reduce Research Station Gamma to radioactive ash. In the distance, she could see explosions and energy discharges as the emergency shelter teams fought their last desperate battle against the surface forces.
It's been an honor serving with all of you, Captain Martinez said formally.
Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she thought about all the things she would never do, all the discoveries she would never make, all the people back on Earth she would never see again. But, mixed with the grief was a fierce pride in what they had accomplished. Humanity had faced its first alien predators and had not gone quietly into extinction.
30 seconds to impact, Yamato announced.
Sarah closed her eyes and thought about Earth, blue skies, green forests, the smell of rain on summer afternoons. She thought about her parents, her sister, the small apartment in New Cambridge where she had dreamed of exploring the stars.
10 seconds. The viewport began to glow as the alien weapons achieved full charge. Sarah opened her eyes to witness the final moment of human presence on Kepler 442b.
But, instead of the expected annihilation, something extraordinary happened.
A new voice crackled through the communications system, transmission coming from somewhere in the planet's surface. Research Station Gamma, this is Emergency Team Charlie.
We've discovered something incredible. The indigenous life forms aren't just native species, they're the survivors of a previous alien harvest attempt.
Sarah's eyes snapped open in shock.
The local wildlife that the aliens had been rounding up weren't random creatures, they were the remnants of another spacefaring species that had faced these same predators.
The indigenous creatures have been trying to communicate with us, the transmission continued. They've been warning us about the harvester species. And they know how to fight them. Dr. Yumoto looked at his sensors in amazement. The orbital bombardment has stopped. The alien vessels are holding position but not firing. Sarah realized that the aliens had detected the communication about the indigenous creatures. These predators had encountered resistance before, and they knew that survivors of previous harvests could pose a serious threat to their operations. Team Charlie, what kind of resistance are you talking about? Captain Martinez demanded. The indigenous creatures have biotech systems of their own, defensive systems that evolved specifically to counter the harvester species. They've been trying to form an alliance with us, but we couldn't understand their communication methods until now. Sarah felt hope blooming in her chest. Humanity wasn't facing the alien threat alone. There were other species that had survived previous encounters with these predators, and they were willing to share their defensive knowledge. The next few hours would determine whether the human colony on Kepler 442b would become another successful harvest for the alien predators, or the beginning of a galactic alliance between species that refused to be consumed. For the first time since the crisis began, Sarah allowed herself to believe that they might actually survive. And, more than that, they might win. The battle for Kepler 442b was far from over, but humanity had just discovered they weren't fighting alone. The predators had drawn near, but, instead of helpless prey, they had found species willing to stand together in defiance. The real war was just beginning. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the reconstructed communications center of Research Station Gamma 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, watching the most remarkable sight in human history. Through the viewport, she could see the combined fleet of human vessels and indigenous Keplerian bioships conducting joint training exercises in the planet's orbit. The alliance that had begun in desperation during the alien attack had grown into something unprecedented, the first interspecies military cooperation in galactic history. The Keplerians, as humans had come to call them, were the remnants of a once great spacefaring civilization that had been nearly destroyed by the harvesters 3,000 years ago. Dr. Chen, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command, announced Lieutenant Williams, the new communications officer who had replaced the personnel lost during the attack. Sarah moved to the communication console, her movements still slightly careful due to the injury she had sustained during the station's defense. The harvesters had been driven off, but not without cost. Of the 63 people who had been stationed at Research Gamma before the attack, only 27 had survived. Admiral Rebecca Torres appeared on the main display, her expression serious but optimistic. Dr. Chen, I'm pleased to report that the joint human Keplerian defensive technologies you helped develop have been successfully implemented across all frontier colonies. The harmonic disruption systems are now standard equipment on every human vessel and installation. Sarah felt a surge of pride. The desperate discovery she and Chief Rodriguez had made in the reactor section had been refined and weaponized into humanity's first effective defense against harvester biotechnology. More importantly, it had become the foundation for human Keplerian technological cooperation. Admiral, how are the other colonies adapting to the new defensive protocols? Sarah asked. Better than expected. The early warning systems provided by our Keplerian allies have given us advance notice of 3 separate harvester incursions. In each case, the joint defense forces were able to repel the attacks with minimal casualties. The early warning systems were perhaps the most valuable aspect of the alliance. The Keplerians had developed a network of biological sensors that could detect harvester approach signatures from enormous distances. Combined with human faster-than-light communication technology, the network provided the galaxy's first effective defense against surprise harvester attacks. Dr. Yumoto entered the communications center, carrying a datapad with the latest research results. Dr. Chen, the xenobiology team has completed their analysis of the harvester specimens recovered from the battle site. The findings are disturbing. Sarah turned her attention to her colleague, who had become the leading expert on harvester biology since the attack. What did you find? The harvesters aren't just one species, Yumoto explained, displaying biological data on his pad. They're a collective organism made up of multiple conquered species that have been biomechanically integrated into a single entity. Each harvester fleet contains the assimilated remains of dozens of different civilizations. The implications were staggering. The aliens weren't just predators, they were a cosmic plague that consumed entire species and turned them into components of their own collective organism.
Every harvester attack added new biological and technological capabilities to their fleet through the assimilation of conquered peoples.
How many species are represented in the specimens we analyzed? Sarah asked. At least 47 distinct genetic lineages that we can identify. Some of them appear to be from civilizations that were conquered thousands of years ago.
The harvesters don't just destroy their victims, they preserve them indefinitely as part of their collective consciousness.
Admiral Torres leaned forward on the display.
Dr. Yamato, are you saying that every species the harvesters have conquered is still alive somewhere within their collective?
In a sense, yes.
Their consciousness and memories have been integrated into the harvester hive mind. From their perspective, they've achieved a kind of immortality through assimilation. Sarah felt a chill run through her as she considered the full horror of harvester civilization. They weren't just facing an alien threat, they were facing the accumulated knowledge and capabilities of dozens of conquered civilizations, all working in perfect coordination under harvester control. James Rodriguez entered the communications center, carrying reports from the joint research teams working with Keplerian scientists.
Sarah, we've had a breakthrough in understanding Keplerian bioship technology. They're willing to share their vessel construction techniques with human engineers. This was the development Sarah had been hoping for.
Keplerian bioships were far more advanced than human spacecraft, capable of self-repair, adaptation to different environments, and integration with biological crew members.
A human fleet equipped with bioship technology would be exponentially more effective against future harvester attacks.
What are the technical requirements? She asked.
That's the interesting part, James replied. Keplerian bioships require a living symbiotic relationship between the vessel and its crew.
Human pilots would need to undergo biological modifications to interface directly with the ship's nervous system.
Admiral Torres looked concerned. Are we talking about permanent biological alterations to human personnel? Dr. Yumoto nodded.
The symbiotic interface requires neural implants and biochemical modifications. Once a human pilot bonds with a bioship, they become permanently linked to that vessel.
It's not reversible. Sarah considered the implications.
Human pilots who accepted bioship integration would gain incredible capabilities, direct mental control over advanced alien technology, enhanced sensory perception, and the ability to interface with Keplerian biological systems. But they would also be forever changed, no longer purely human.
How many volunteers do we have? She asked.
James checked his datapad.
More than we expected.
Despite the permanent nature of the modifications, over 200 human pilots have volunteered for the bioship program. They understand the risks, but they also understand the advantages. The volunteers were mostly military personnel who had witnessed the harvester attacks firsthand. They had seen how conventional human technology struggled against harvester biomechanical systems, and they were willing to undergo permanent alteration to help defend humanity against future threats.
Admiral, Sarah said to the display, I recommend we proceed with the bioship integration program. The tactical advantages outweigh the risks, and we need every possible edge against the harvesters. Admiral Torres was quiet for a moment, considering the decision. Authorizing the permanent biological modification of human personnel was unprecedented in military history.
But, then, again, humanity was facing threats that were equally unprecedented.
Authorization granted, the Admiral finally said. Dr. Chen, you'll oversee the integration program from the Kepler 442b facility.
This is now your primary mission. Over the following weeks, Sarah worked closely with Keplerian biotechnicians to establish the first human bioship integration facility. The process was complex and dangerous, merging human neural systems with alien biological technology pushed the boundaries of what either species thought possible. The first successful integration was performed on Commander Lisa Park, a veteran pilot who had lost her ship during the harvester attack. Sarah watched through the medical monitoring systems as Commander Park's consciousness merged with the bioship's neural network. Integration complete, reported the Keplerian biotechnician, its translated voice carrying tones of satisfaction.
Human pilot now functioning as vessel primary consciousness.
Sarah watched the bioship respond to Commander Park's thoughts, moving through space with a grace and precision that no conventional human vessel could match. The ship's living hull could adapt its configuration for different mission requirements, its biological weapon systems could evolve countermeasures against enemy attacks in real time, and its sensory organs could detect threats across multiple spectrums simultaneously.
Commander Park, how do you feel?" Sarah asked through the communication system.
Park's response came not through conventional radio, but through the bioship's own communication organs. Her voice had a strange harmonic quality that suggested the ship was participating in the conversation.
"It's incredible, Dr. Chen. I can feel everything the ship feels, the solar wind, the gravitational fields, even the quantum fluctuations in spacetime. It's like having senses I never knew were possible."
Sarah documented every aspect of the integration process, knowing that this information would be crucial for training future bioship pilots.
The symbiotic relationship between human and Keplerian technology represented a new phase in human evolution, one driven by the necessity of survival against an implacable alien threat.
3 months after the first successful integration, Sarah received word that changed the course of the war.
"Dr. Chen," announced Lieutenant Williams, "we're receiving an emergency transmission from the outer sensor network. Multiple harvester fleets have been detected approaching the Kepler system."
Sarah felt her pulse quicken as she reviewed the sensor data. The approaching harvester force was enormous, far larger than the fleet that had attacked Research Station Gamma.
They were facing a full-scale invasion force that could overwhelm even the combined human Keplerian defenses.
"How long until they reach our position?" she asked.
"Approximately 72 hours, Williams replied.
Sarah activated the emergency communication system to contact all Allied forces in the system.
"All units, this is Dr. Chen at Research Station Gamma.
We have confirmed harvester invasion force approaching.
Implement Defense Protocol Omega immediately." Defense Protocol Omega was the most desperate strategy in the Human Keplerian Alliance playbook.
Instead of fighting a defensive battle around Kepler 442b, the Allied forces would take the fight directly to the harvesters using coordinated bioship assault tactics. Over the next 72 hours, Sarah watched as human pilots integrated with Keplerian bioships prepared for humanity's first offensive action against the harvesters. The fleet that assembled around Kepler 442b represented the best of both species, human tactical innovation combined with Keplerian biological technology. Commander Park's bioship had become the flagship of the human squadron, its capabilities enhanced through constant integration with its pilot. Sarah felt a sense of pride as she watched the vessel respond to Park's commands with precision that exceeded anything in human military history. "All units report ready," announced Captain Martinez, who had been promoted to fleet coordinator after the defense of Research Station Gamma.
Sarah opened a communication channel to the entire Allied fleet.
"Human and Keplerian forces, you carry with you the hopes of two species that refuse to be harvested. Today we prove that predators can become prey when their victims stand together in defiance." The combined fleet launched toward the approaching harvester armada, ready to engage in a battle that would determine the fate of not just humanity and the Keplerians, but potentially every free species in the galaxy. As Sarah watched the fleet disappear into the darkness of space, she reflected on how far humanity had come since that first terrifying contact with alien predators. They had started as helpless prey, but they had evolved into something far more dangerous, a species willing to sacrifice everything to protect others from the cosmic horror of harvester assimilation. The predators had drawn near, expecting to find defenseless cubs to harvest. Instead, they had awakened humanity's protective instincts and created an alliance that would reshape the galaxy. The battle for Kepler 442b had been just the beginning. Now it was time for humanity to show the universe what happened when predators threatened those under human protection. They were about to discover that the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy weren't the ones with the biggest teeth, they were the ones willing to growl in defiance when others needed protection.